This is a special edition of Sky News at 10, live from Gaziantep in Turkey. More than 20,000 people have died following the earthquakes as people here start to bury the dead. The first aid lorries finally start to reach Syria and some of the more remote areas of Turkey. And we witness the pain and despair of people waiting to hear if their loved ones have made it out alive.
Also ahead tonight, nearly 2 weeks after Nicola Bulley disappeared, the search for the missing mum moves out to sea. More than 7 million people wait for elective surgery, with strikes adding to the pressures on the NHS and more planned for tomorrow.
We have now realised that winter pressures are 12 months, not just 3 months.
The Church of England shifts its stance, meaning priests will be permitted to bless same-sex civil marriages.
The moment I wake up, before I put on my makeup.
And Burt Bacharach, the composer behind hits including Walk On By and Say a Little Prayer, dies at the age of 94. And we'll take a first look at tomorrow's front pages in our press preview from around 10:40.
Good evening, it's 1 a.m. here in Gaziantep in Turkey, and still rescue workers are desperately searching for any signs of survival. But today came the news that more than 20,000 people have died since the earthquake hit on Monday. There are still pockets of hope here, and today news that the first vans carrying aid crossed the border into Syria since the earthquake struck. The first earthquake of 7.8 magnitude came in the early hours of Monday morning. The red area on this map shows the areas that experienced the worst affected regions. It was then followed by an aftershock of 7.5 magnitude just hours later to the north. The World Health Organization estimates that more than 23 million people have been affected across Turkey and Syria, more than 1 million of whom are children. Syrian state media said more than 298,000 people have been displaced in the government-controlled parts of the country, but that doesn't include rebel-held Idlib. Now, Sky News teams have reached the earthquake's epicenter in Kahramanmaraş, as well as the Syrian border, where survivors are still waiting for aid. And later in the programme, we'll be looking at how these earthquakes cause so much destruction, reducing high-rise buildings to rubble. But first, our Europe correspondent Siobhan Robbins reports from the city of Adiyaman.
Turkey is burying its dead. Loved ones crushed while they slept. Children, parents, partners. The loss is profound. This woman's daughter is among those killed. When her body was found, she had her baby in her arms. The pain is too much. I wish I died and my children had lived, she says. Grief echoes around Adiyaman. The earthquake totaled much of the city, but people say it took 2 days for help to arrive. By which time, the voices below the rubble had fallen silent. So the body bags keep arriving, 50 here in an hour, and with them the anger mounts. This woman curses the president. She says she hears her nephew begging for help from the wreckage, help that never came. But others are still waiting for news. When this apartment collapsed, homes became tombs. As rescuers search for the hundreds still missing, distraught relatives watch on. The only thing we have is hope, Mahmoud tells me. So we wait to the end. 6 of his family are buried here. He has little else to lose. Whole families died in this collapse, generations wiped out, and this is a pattern which is repeated tens of times in this city, thousands of times across Turkey. For now, they will mourn their dead. But with each new coffin, the same question. If help had come sooner, could this life have been saved? Siobhan Robbins, Sky News, Adiyaman, Turkey.
Well, it's approaching 4 days since the earthquake struck in the early hours of Monday morning, and the so-called golden period when survivors may still be found alive is coming to an end. But we have witnessed moments when people are lifted from the rubble. Our international correspondent John Sparks has the latest from Kahramanmaraş, at the epicentre of the earthquake, and a warning: his report contains pictures of bodies being removed from the scene of the disaster.
The air is soaked in dust and smoke. The city marked with concrete mounds. But in this apocalyptic state, there is evidence of life. Human beings still breathing in the rubble. At the Abra apartment block, we saw an Israeli rescue team exploring the remains. One of the first international groups to reach Kahramanmaraş. And they had made a life-saving discovery. A young woman had been rescued from the gloom. Her name, Zeynep Çivi. She was fast asleep when the earthquake struck, dressed in polka dot pajamas, and we could see her shivering and crying after her 3-day ordeal. We're here, don't be afraid, said a paramedic. Her younger sister, Elif, followed right behind. The 20-year-old was also shivering. But the rescuers were elated, and the family overjoyed, praying for a miracle. They'd been delivered too.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
His name is Burak, and he told us he's the girl's cousin.
Did you think that you had lost her, or did you still have hope in your heart?
We thought they were dead. We'd prepared the burial plot. The Israelis said the sister's survival owed much to chance, some information from an earlier success.
Yesterday night, we pulled out a man named Hussein. He was 65 years old. And he told us that he heard voices. And we penetrated the additional room, and we didn't find anyone. But we decided to return to this building again. Maybe he was right. So it was not so close, but we found 2 women here.
We've just come around the corner. It's the same building, but the contrast could not be any greater. These are local people. They are using crowbars and spades to try and get access to the building. They want to do the same thing. They're trying to save people's lives. They're trying to retrieve bodies, but it is going to take them much, much longer to do it.
They can smell and in some cases see the bodies, but it doesn't mean they can get them out.
What is happening here?
We can smell a body here, says this volunteer. The body is lying on a bed, so we're trying to dislodge it. The victims make an undignified trip to a sports stadium for identification. Some go by hand, others in diggers, while the injured go to local hospitals like this one, which has turned its reception into a giant ward. Here we met a relative of Zeynep and Elif, and we asked him how they were doing.
Normal.
No injuries, said cousin Kasım Çivit, but they're bruised and cold, and they're trying to revive them. Specialists and supplies have begun to arrive here, but they can't meet the demand in this traumatized city. John Sparks, Sky News, in Kahramanmaraş.
Well, in Syria, residents there have already endured years of war, and now they are waiting days for help and much-needed aid. Today, though, the first aid supplies have finally crossed the border into Syria, and now many Syrians who fled are returning home to help. Yusra Elbagir reports from the Syria-Turkey border.
Volunteers in Idlib are doing what they can with what they have. Cut off from the world and international rescue efforts. This man begs the international community to help with a breaking voice. Some of those who responded to us yesterday are dead today, he says. This site is just one of many in a war-torn country further flattened by these earthquakes. This volunteer says there are around 500 families buried under this rubble, women and children, and they don't know who is dead and who is alive. Blankets are used as body bags, and this small bundle carried out of the wreckage tells the story of a tragic end to a short life. But there are still miracles at play. The newborn baby pulled out from under a collapsed building, still attached to her mother, now has a name. The doctors have called her Aya. It alludes to the sign of a miracle, a Quranic revelation straight from God. The first few trucks carrying aid to Syria finally made it through the Bab al-Hawa border point. But many say that it's too little, too late. All other crossings are currently excluded from the United Nations cross-border agreement with the Assad regime. This is a border crossing into northwest Syria, only an hour away from Aleppo. And over the last 11 years of war, it's seen millions pass through into Turkey seeking refuge. And now many Syrians are moving back that way into the country to help with rescue efforts. Anxious, like these men here, anxious to make it through and help. He tells me he sees no reason why the world isn't rushing in to support Syria. I ask about the sanctions, and they say they shouldn't be enforced on the people. He points in the direction of Turkey and then back to the border. They're still finding survivors. What about us, he says. There's no state. There's nothing. As they wait to get in, a truck goes back and forth, taking the bodies of Syrians home to be buried, and then back into Turkey to retrieve some more. Yusra al-Bagir, Sky News, Kilis, Turkey.
Well, when the 7.8 magnitude earthquake struck in the early hours of Monday morning, many people were in their homes sleeping. Those homes, sometimes in huge apartment blocks, are now reduced to rubble. In the coming days and weeks, there will inevitably be questions about how this amount of death and destruction was possible. Sky's science and technology editor, Tom Clark, has been analysing the building data in Turkey.
The images are almost unbearably distressing. Collapsed buildings, which are the main reason for the catastrophic loss of life resulting from this earthquake. So why was this one so bad? Well, the main thing, of course, was just how severe the earthquake was. This is a shake map for the first 7.8 magnitude quake. The red triangles are part of a sensor network that measure ground movement. In some locations, the speed the ground moved was extreme. Here in Hajilar, ground acceleration from the quake was approaching 8 meters per second. In Kurikan, it was well above 7 meters a second. Now, these measurements are preliminary, but Sky News understands that in some areas they exceeded levels expected in Turkey's earthquake design codes. Buildings are designed to cope with a 1 in 475-year earthquake event and not collapse in a 1 in 2,500-year event. Yet the shaking appears to have exceeded the upper limit of what would have been expected every 2,500 years.
Even a very well designed and well executed building would have suffered, would have been challenged. But again, this doesn't rule out that the building stock that we are seeing basically collapsing was free of defects and problems.
Previous earthquakes in Turkey have highlighted those problems, both the age but also quality of newer building construction. The city of Gaziantep experienced considerably less intense shaking, yet buildings still failed, sometimes catastrophically. And these risks were known. Last year, a team of Turkish seismologists studied the city of Gaziantep. Using earthquake risk data, they identified which neighbourhoods were most vulnerable to a big quake. Those in the darkest colours in this map where they forecast 50 to 60% of the buildings to suffer damage, generally the areas with the oldest or poorest quality buildings. But crucially, the hypothetical earthquake they based their study on was 10 times less powerful than the one that struck on Monday. So age and quality of buildings was a major factor, but so too perhaps was the estimation of risks. And don't forget, this wasn't just one earthquake. A huge magnitude 7.5 aftershock toppled buildings that survived the initial quake and damaged others beyond repair. Even these structures that remain standing may now be uninhabitable, a colossal challenge for authorities already dealing with at least tens of thousands of people made homeless by this disaster.
Well, this is now thought to be Turkey and Syria's most devastating natural disaster in over 80 years, and the Disasters Emergency Committee have released an appeal for help. Here's some of that appeal.
Please, donate now. Their trauma cannot be undone, but we can and we must help.
And of course, the earthquake is being covered in tomorrow's newspapers. The Metro leads on a photo of a 2-year-old being rescued here in Turkey after spending 79 hours under the rubble. The press review will be taking place a little later because of our especially extended news at 10. That'll be at 10:40 this evening. Well, here the rescue efforts go on. They're about to remove a very large piece of masonry, as you can see, and we'll be back a little later in the programme.
Good evening. Back here, it's been nearly 2 weeks since the disappearance of Nicola Bulley, who went missing while walking her dog by a river in St Michael's-on-Wye in Lancashire. The police looking for the mother of two today moved their search to the coast. From there, Inzamam Rashid reports.
Searching at sea. Almost 2 weeks on, and for police, the choppy coastline is now the focus as they continue to look for missing Nicola Bulley. They're scouring waters over 10 miles downstream from where the mum of two was last spotted. Police believe, day by day, finding her in the open sea becomes more of a possibility. At the bench where Nicola's phone, dog Willow, and its lead were found, searching has come to a halt. Investigators confirmed resources are now being piled into finding clues further along this deep, fast-flowing river. If the police's theory that Nicola Bulley accidentally slipped into the River Wyre is true, then finding any trace of her downstream will prove incredibly difficult. The tidal nature of this river will cause almost anything to move back and forth constantly, and the area to search, including the coast, is vast.
The size and scale and the expanse of that area will obviously present difficulties. There are obviously currents and tidal flows to consider that can take things in various directions. There will be sandbanks, you've got high tide, low tide, but all these things will be factored in with other agencies, partner agencies who've got expertise in that area, who will be working with the police to help them formulate the best possible search parameters for that area.
Whilst her friends and family have praised the efforts of the police, for them something doesn't add up. They want all possibilities of her disappearance investigated. Friday morning marks 2 weeks since Nicola left her home, dropped off her children at school and took her dog for a walk. It was nothing out of the ordinary. What was, however, is she didn't come home. A mystery for many, an agonising fortnight for her family. Inzamam Rashid, Sky News, Lancashire.
Ambulance crews reached emergencies an hour quicker in January compared with December, but they're still falling short of targets and pre-pandemic levels. Ongoing strikes continue to pile pressure on the service, with more walkouts expected tomorrow. Well, a year ago, NHS England launched its elective recovery plan to reduce a backlog of 6 million people waiting for routine hospital treatment. Well, that number is now 7.2 million, increasing every month except January this year. The number has started to stabilise, but there are concerns industrial action is impacting efforts, with more than 137,000 hospital appointments postponed since strikes began. Our health correspondent Ashish Joshi reports now from Heatherwood Hospital in Ascot.
Any concerns from anyone? Surgical team, scrub team, okay?
For surgeon Jeremy Granville Chapman and his team, this operation is the very definition of routine.
We're going to repair the torn tendon at the front, which is one of his deep layer of muscles called the rotator cuff.
They've carried out more than 1,000 joint operations at Heatherwood Hospital in under 10 months. His patient, Pradeep Gill, slipped in his garden in August. He landed awkwardly, tearing the tendons in his arm. Before today, he was one of more than 7 million people waiting for routine hospital treatment. That waiting list has grown by over 1 million in the last year alone. And while there's no doubt that elective surgery hubs like this one will have an impact, that impact will depend very much on other factors, like the workforce crisis and the industrial action that's being staged by health workers. This is a specialist planned care facility. They can do as many as 80 joint replacements a week. And the hope is that hospitals like this one will mean less pressure is felt across the wider health service.
We have now realized that winter pressures are 12 months, not just 3 months, which means the acute sites are not going to be able to do planned activity what they planned for. So we got to create more space.
Is this going to be a model for the future?
This is the model. We're already looking, can we expand this unit? Can we make 2 more theatres next year to take the pressure off?
The government has made reducing NHS waiting lists one of its 5 priorities for the year. And new surgical hubs like this one might be the key to making it happen. But it is yet to reveal how it plans to recruit and retain enough staff.
The announcement of a long-term workforce plan is positive. What we need in that workforce plan is a plan for both increasing the workforce, how many workforce we need, how you retain the workforce, and also how we fund all of these extra staff.
Pradeep is now out of surgery and should be home in just a couple of hours.
You don't realise, how much you take things for granted with your mobility and being able to move your arm, how much it restricts you.
Of course.
So, yeah, I'm glad.
Elective surgery, but also life-changing, with millions more waiting in line. Ashish Joshi, Sky News at Heatherwood Hospital in Ascot.
The latest on the war in Ukraine now, and President Zelenskyy is continuing his tour of Europe, today addressing the European Parliament in Brussels. The Ukrainian president told assembled politicians that Russia is trying to annihilate European values and renewed his plea for modern jets. Today, a Kremlin spokesperson told Sky News that talks of sending NATO jets would lead to an escalation of tension around this conflict. Our international affairs editor, Dominic Waghorn, reports.
On a British jet, President Zelenskyy landed for the second part of his European mission. In Paris first, then on to Brussels.
President Zelenskyy, welcome to Europe. You're welcome to Europe. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Warm greetings for the wartime president and a welcome from EU leaders gathered to hear him. Some, like the Dutch, have already sounded open to giving him fighter jets, others less so. After addressing Britain's MPs yesterday,
His Excellency Volodymyr Zelensky.
He was here to rally support in the European Parliament.
Slava Ukraini!
Glory to Ukraine.
But it was at the press conference afterwards where he claimed he's already been given assurances by Europe he will be sent jets to help fight the Russians.
I have been very inspired by your statements that Europe will be with us until our victory. I've heard it from a number of the European leaders, and I'm very grateful to them for this. I've heard about the readiness to give us the necessary weapons and support, including the aircrafts.
The Ukrainians need multi-role combat aircraft, like F-16s made in America but flown by several European countries, and Eurofighters widely used by European air forces too. Military analysts believe it's only a matter of time before warplanes are sent to Ukraine.
When the decision was made to send main battle tanks, that was the step change. And having done that, I think politically that's the allied countries saying we are going to back you to the point until you defeat and push the Russians out of the geographic boundaries of Ukraine.
In response, Russia released these pictures today of a tank factory toured by a former prime minister.
It's clear in this case it's natural for us to increase the production of various types of weapons and military equipment, including modern tanks.
President Zelenskyy flies home knowing he has brought Europe closer to upping the ante again as allies consider sending warplanes to support tanks already on their way. Dominic Waghorn, Sky News.
The US House of Representatives has unanimously voted to condemn China's balloon surveillance program as a brazen violation of US sovereignty. The House voted 419-0 for the resolution 5 days after the US Air Force shot down the device over the Atlantic Ocean. Beijing's always maintained that the balloon was monitoring weather for civilian purposes. Former Culture Secretary Nadine Dorries has announced that she will not stand at the next general election. Ms Dorries has been MP for Mid Bedfordshire since 2005 and in recent years has earned a reputation as one of the most loyal supporters of former Prime Minister Boris Johnson. The press regulators launched an investigation into Jeremy Clarkson's article in The Sun about the Duchess of Sussex. His column in December received more than 25,000 complaints and he later apologised. The Independent Press Standards Organisation says it'll examine potential breaches of the code involving accuracy, harassment and discrimination. The Church of England has voted to recognise and bless same-sex marriages and unions. However, a ban on equal marriage within the Church itself remains. After several days of divisive debate in the Synod, the Church's National Assembly, the motion was carried. As Sky's Sharman Freeman-Powell now reports.
A two-day debate in the Anglican Church's Parliament.
Those in favour, please show. Those against?
But it's an issue that's been wrangled over for years.
We've spent decades even trying to argue for the Church to say anything positive in a corporate way about same-sex relationships. Today was that day. Today, General Synod said and affirmed there is good in same-sex relationships. This is part of God's good creation. And for me, that's a wonderful first step.
For the first time ever, the Church of England says same-sex couples will be publicly, unreservedly and joyfully welcomed inside of the Church. It now means that same-sex couples can have their ceremonies blessed, but they still won't be able to get married inside of the Church itself. The Church of England is under no illusion. There are deep Anglican divisions on the issue, not just in this country, but around the world, where consequences can be grave.
I'm genuinely torn by this. The differences we have here are small compared to those with many around the communion. This isn't just about listening to the rest of the world, it's caring. Let's just be clear on that. It's about people who'll die, women who'll be raped, children who'll be tortured.
And a proposal intended to put an end to decades of disagreement has instead exposed deep-rooted disparities.
A number of us voted against because we don't think it's possible to keep everybody happy. You can't say that a certain pattern of relationships is blessed on the one hand, but at the same time say it doesn't contravene the current teaching of the church.
Although the motion was passed, there are still terms that need to be finalised in a proposal that's gone too far for some and not far enough for others. Shaman Freeman-Powell, Sky News.
Welcome back to Gaziantep in Turkey, where the search and rescue operations continue behind me here. We have some breaking news, by the way, on aid being sent from the UK. The MOD has said that the UK will send thousands of thermal blankets on RAF transport planes departing tonight. Further emergency aid issued in the coming days will include a field hospital with a 24/7 operating theatre, as well as high dependency and general ward patient beds. That help coming in from the UK. Now, we've been here for a few days and, well, we've watched these people frantically searching for their loved ones under piles of debris. They've wept in moments when they realise that their search is lost, and also rare moments of joy when the rescuers reach people alive. Earlier, we travelled to the city of Nurdar, here in southern Turkey, and this is what we found.
Suddenly, in the battered town of Nurdar, there is excitement. They've heard a voice, and desperately, they drill their way down. Eventually, they see a face. It is a young man named Halit, and he's alive. An ambulance is brought closer. Blankets and a stretcher are called for, and his cousin and others who know him dare to hope. And watching, you just thought of the bravery of the men working to get him out, working below shattered, leaning buildings that could collapse at any time. Then a doctor calls for water for Halit. But it is too late. He dies before they can save him. Moments later, more shouting, and they run to the back of the building. I've heard my sister crying in the rubble. Please be quick, please, please. The grandfather is being ushered away from a scene he can't bear to leave. Is she dead, he says. Please be alive. With the ambulance on its way, the search team listens for the sign of life. We are here since yesterday night, he tells me. We will find her. We will find her. And with that, the sister of the missing girl passes out. They didn't hear another voice, but that doesn't stop them waiting. As we left, hope was fading here. The girl who fainted was back. She will not give up. An international rescue team arrives to raise hopes again. And so the wait goes on. What we witnessed here is happening right now across this region. The problem is that time is fast running out.
Yes, it really is the frantic nature of the searching going on now, but it's the humanity as well. People here and across this region just willing these rescuers to have some success, and there is, you know, desperate hope, but that's followed more often than not by the depths of grief.